It was a typical Tuesday morning when my world tilted on its axis. I was sipping my lukewarm coffee, trying to muster the energy to tackle the endless spreadsheets waiting for me at work, when my laptop pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "For your eyes only." It was the kind of message that made your stomach drop before you even opened it. My name is Harper, and I'm an urban planner with a knack for finding the beauty in chaos. I've spent years designing spaces that bring people together, but nothing could prepare me for the mess I was about to dive into. I've been engaged to Ethan for a year, and while most of our relationship has been a dream, his family has always been a thorn in our side. Especially Vanessa, his sister, whose presence is as overwhelming as her social media following. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the email. It was anonymous, filled with screenshots of financial transactions that didn't make sense. Money was being siphoned from Ethan's accounts, and the name attached to these transactions was none other than Vanessa Calloway. My heart raced as I scrolled through the evidence. It felt like a scene from a bad thriller, but this was my life. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind a whirlpool of confusion and disbelief. Was this real? Could Vanessa really be stealing from her brother? And why would someone send this to me? The questions buzzed around my head like angry bees. As I closed the laptop, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no denying it. Something was seriously wrong. Ethan walked into the room, his hair still damp from his morning shower. "Hey, you ready for work?" he asked, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Yeah, just finishing up some last-minute stuff," I replied, forcing a smile. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I wanted to tell him, to lay everything out and demand answers, but a part of me hesitated. What if there was more to this than just Vanessa's greed? What if I was missing a piece of the puzzle? Ethan leaned over and kissed my forehead, his touch warm and reassuring. "You okay? You look a bit distracted." "Just thinking about work," I lied, my stomach twisting with guilt. I hated keeping things from him, but I needed time to think, to figure out the best way to protect him without causing unnecessary pain. As I watched him leave for the office, I felt a pang of regret. I knew I couldn't sit on this information forever. But for now, I needed to gather more evidence to understand the full picture before confronting him. I took a deep breath and decided to do some digging of my own. Throughout the day, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to that email. I replayed every interaction I'd had with Vanessa, searching for signs I might have missed. She was always so charming, so effortlessly confident. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe her charisma was just a mask, hiding something darker underneath. I spent my lunch break scrolling through Vanessa's social media, looking for anything that could hint at financial trouble or desperation. But all I saw were perfectly curated images of exotic vacations, designer clothes, and glamorous parties. It was a life that seemed far removed from any financial woes. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Ethan was already there, cooking dinner, the smell of garlic and herbs filling the air. He looked up as I entered, a smile lighting up his face. "Hey, how was your day?" "It was interesting," I replied, trying to sound casual. But inside, I was a bundle of nerves, wound tight and ready to snap. As we sat down to eat, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. But how do you tell the person you love that their own sister might be betraying them? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. And then, just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed with another email notification. I glanced at the screen, my heart skipping a beat as I read the subject line, "You're not safe." The words sent a shiver down my spine, and I knew this was just the beginning. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than I'd imagined, and I was right in the middle of it. The Calloway family dinners were always a test of endurance. Margaret's dining room was a shrine to tradition, with its heavy drapes and antique china, a stark contrast to the tension simmering beneath the surface. As Ethan and I stepped inside, I could feel the weight of expectations settling over me like a too-tight sweater. Margaret greeted us with a polite smile, her eyes scanning me with the precision of a seasoned banker assessing a risky investment. "Harper, dear, so lovely to see you," she said, her voice smooth but lacking warmth. "Thank you, Margaret." "It's nice to be here," I replied, matching her tone. Ethan squeezed my hand, a silent pledge of solidarity amidst the storm. Vanessa was already at the table. scrolling through her phone with the practiced indifference of someone who knew the world was watching her every move. She looked up, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, Harper. Loving the outfit. Very urban chic." I nodded, trying not to roll my eyes. "Thanks, Vanessa. You look great too," I replied, my words as hollow as hers. Dinner commenced with the usual small talk, the kind that danced around the real issues without ever addressing them. Margaret asked Ethan about work, her questions pointed and probing, while Vanessa interjected with stories of her latest influencer escapades. Ethan played along, his laughter a little too forced, his eyes darting to me every so often as if checking to make sure I was still there. As the evening wore on, Margaret turned her attention to me. "So, Harper, how's the planning world treating you? Still building those inclusive communities?" I nodded, keeping my smile fixed. "Yes, it's going well. We've just started a new project downtown. It's exciting to see how we can transform spaces to bring people together." "Interesting," Margaret replied, her tone suggesting otherwise. "I suppose it's quite a challenge, trying to make everyone happy." "It is," I agreed. "But it's worth it when you see the impact it can have." Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Speaking of challenges, Harper, I heard you've been quite busy lately. Anything new on your plate?" Her words were innocent enough, but there was an edge to them, a subtle jab that made my skin prickle. I met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "Just the usual work stuff. Nothing too exciting." Ethan shifted in his seat, sensing the undercurrent, but unsure how to navigate it. "Vanessa, have you thought about collaborating with Harper on one of her projects? Your influence could really bring attention to the cause." Vanessa laughed, a tinkling sound that felt rehearsed. "Oh, Ethan, I don't think Harper needs my help. She's doing just fine on her own." Margaret's eyes flicked between us, her expression unreadable. "Well, I'm sure Harper appreciates the offer," she said, her voice like velvet over steel. I forced another smile, my patience wearing thin. "Of course. Collaboration is always welcome." As dessert was served, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. The email from earlier still weighed heavily on my mind, and the dinner had only added to the pressure. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to clear my thoughts. When I returned, I caught the tail end of a conversation between Ethan and his parents. Robert, usually the silent observer, was speaking with unusual fervor. "Ethan, we only want what's best for you. Family is important." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "I know, Dad. But Harper is my family too." The room went quiet, the air thick with unspoken words. Vanessa's eyes flicked to me, something like surprise crossing her features before she masked it with a smile. "Well, family dinners are always interesting, aren't they?" I took my seat, feeling the tension coil tighter. The night ended with polite goodbyes and promises to do this again soon, though I doubted anyone truly meant it. As we drove home, Ethan was unusually quiet, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the steering wheel. "Harper, I'm sorry about tonight. They can be intense." I reached over, placing my hand over his. "It's okay. I know they mean well in their own way." He sighed, glancing at me with a mixture of gratitude and frustration. "I just wish they could see how amazing you are. How much you mean to me." I smiled, touched by his words. But the unease lingered, a shadow that refused to be dispelled. And as we pulled into our driveway, I knew that the family dinner had only scratched the surface of the turmoil to come. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination simmering beneath my skin. Last night's dinner had only confirmed what I already knew. Something had to give. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine while Vanessa was potentially stealing from Ethan. The email evidence was a ticking time bomb, and it was time to defuse it. After Ethan left for work, I sat at the kitchen table, the email open on my laptop. My heart pounded as I reread the transactions, each one a betrayal that cut deeper than the last. I knew I had to tell Ethan, no matter how much it hurt. When he returned home that evening, I was ready. We settled on the couch, and I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Ethan, there's something we need to talk about," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He looked at me, concern etched on his face. "What's going on, Harper?" I handed him the laptop, the email displayed in stark black and white. "I got this a couple of days ago. It's about Vanessa." Ethan's eyes scanned the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. This can't be right," he said, his voice tight with shock. I know it's hard to believe, I replied gently, but we need to figure out what's going on. I didn't want to keep it from you, but I had to be sure. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and disbelief. Why would she do this? Vanessa's always been difficult, but this. I don't know, I said, my heart aching for him. But we need to confront her. We can't just let this slide. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. You're right. We need answers. The next day, Ethan arranged to meet Vanessa at a cafe downtown. I insisted on coming along, needing to see the confrontation through. As we walked in, Vanessa was already there, sipping a latte with the practiced grace of someone who knew they were being watched. Hey, you two, she greeted us, her smile bright but brittle. Ethan didn't waste time. Vanessa, we need to talk about something serious. Her smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Okay, what's this about? He placed the laptop on the table, the email open for her to see. Can you explain this? Vanessa's eyes widened as she took in the information, her expression shifting from surprise to indignation. This is ridiculous. You think I'd steal from you, Ethan? Then how do you explain these transactions? Ethan pressed, his voice a mixture of anger and hurt. She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. But then her gaze hardened. I don't know what this is, but it's not me. Someone's trying to set me up. Ethan's jaw clenched, his frustration palpable. Vanessa, we need the truth. Her eyes flashed with defiance. I swear, Ethan, I didn't do this. You have to believe me. The tension hung heavy between us, an invisible barrier that seemed impossible to cross. I glanced at Ethan, seeing the conflict etched in his features. He wanted to believe her, but the evidence was damning. Just as I thought the conversation was reaching a dead end, Vanessa let slip, "You really think Mom would let something like this happen?" Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing. What does Mom have to do with this? Vanessa's expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing her face. Nothing. I just mean she's always watching out for us. But the damage was done. Ethan's suspicion was piqued, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. There was more to this than just Vanessa's actions, and now it seemed Margaret might be involved too. As we left the cafe, Ethan was silent, his thoughts a storm of confusion and betrayal. I reached for his hand, offering what comfort I could. We'll figure this out, Ethan. Together. He nodded, his grip tightening on mine. I just never thought it would come to this. My own family. I understood his pain, the sense of betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. But I also knew that uncovering the truth was the only way forward. As we walked back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. And whatever secrets lay buried in the Calloway family, we would face them together. The days following our confrontation with Vanessa were tense, like living in a pressure cooker with the heat slowly rising. Ethan and I were navigating a minefield, and every step felt precarious. We knew we had to address the elephant in the room, Margaret's possible involvement, but the question was how. One evening, Ethan came home with a determined look in his eyes. We need to talk to my parents, he said, his voice firm but weary. Are you sure? I asked, my own doubts gnawing at me. What if it makes things worse? He shook his head, resolute. We can't keep avoiding it. If there's something more going on, we need to know. I nodded, understanding the necessity, even as my stomach twisted with anxiety. We agreed to visit them the next day, hoping for clarity but bracing for the fallout. The Calloway residence was as imposing as ever, its grandeur overshadowed by the tension that seemed to seep from its walls. Margaret greeted us with her usual poise, but there was an edge to her demeanor, as if she sensed the storm brewing. To what do we owe this surprise visit? She asked, her tone light but her eyes watchful. Ethan didn't waste time. We need to talk about Vanessa and the money. Margaret's smile faltered, a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossing her face. What about it? Ethan took a deep breath, his grip on my hand reassuring. We have evidence that Vanessa might have been siphoning money from my accounts. And she mentioned something about you when we confronted her. Margaret's expression hardened, her gaze shifting to me as if searching for weakness. And you believe her? You think I'm involved in some scheme against my own son? The accusation hung heavy in the air, and I could feel Ethan's struggle, caught between loyalty to his family and the truth staring him in the face. We just want to understand what's going on, he said, his voice a mix of frustration and pleading. Robert, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this calmly. Margaret shot him a look, but he held her gaze, a silent communication passing between them. Reluctantly, she nodded, and we moved to the living room, the atmosphere tense and charged. As we settled into our seats, I noticed Margaret's fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the armrest, a small crack in her otherwise composed facade. Vanessa has always been impulsive, but I assure you I have no knowledge of any financial misdeeds, she said, her voice steady but lacking conviction. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. Then why did she mention you? What aren't you telling us? Margaret hesitated, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing her features before she masked it with resolve. There are things you don't understand, Ethan. Family matters that are best left in the past. Her words were cryptic, a veil over whatever secrets lay beneath. But before Ethan could press further, Vanessa walked in, her expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. I didn't do it, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I swear I didn't. Ethan turned to her, his frustration evident. Then why all the secrecy? Why drag Mom into this? Vanessa's eyes flicked to Margaret, a silent plea for help. But Margaret remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths, until Robert spoke up, his voice calm but firm. Perhaps it's time we all stopped dancing around the issue. If there's something going on, it's better to address it now. Margaret's gaze softened, a rare glimpse of the woman behind the armor. It's complicated, Ethan. There are things I've done to protect this family, to keep us together. Her admission hung in the air, a crack in the foundation that threatened to widen. I could see Ethan's resolve wavering, torn between anger and a desire to understand. I placed a hand on his arm, grounding him in the moment. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together. The room was silent, the weight of the truth pressing down on us all. And in that moment, I realized that this was about more than just money or betrayal. It was about a family grappling with its own demons, and the lengths they would go to protect their own. As we left the house, I felt a shift in the air, a sense of inevitability that left me both anxious and strangely hopeful. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like we were moving towards something real, something honest. And whatever lay ahead, I knew we would face it together. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. I lay awake, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The confrontation with Margaret had left more questions than answers. And the family's silence was a deafening reminder of the secrets that still lay hidden. Ethan was already up, pacing the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand. His eyes were shadowed with fatigue, the strain of the past few days evident in every line of his face. We need to do something, he said, breaking the silence. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what that something was. Maybe we should talk to my dad, I suggested, thinking of Gregory's steady wisdom. He might have some insight on how to handle this. Ethan agreed, and later that day, we found ourselves at my father's house. Gregory greeted us with his usual warmth, his presence a balm against the chaos. Over tea, we laid out the situation, from the financial discrepancies to the cryptic hints of family secrets. Gregory listened intently, his expression thoughtful. It sounds like there's a lot more going on beneath the surface, he said, his voice calm and measured. You need to approach this with care, but also with honesty. Secrets have a way of festering if left unchecked. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just don't know how to get through to them. It's like they're all hiding something, and I'm stuck in the middle. Gregory nodded, a sympathetic smile on his lips. Sometimes, the best way to deal with secrets is to bring them into the light. Confront them head-on, but be prepared for what you might find. As we left, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, though the path ahead was still uncertain. We needed to confront the family to demand the truth, but it was a daunting prospect. Back at home, Ethan and I discussed our next steps, our conversation punctuated by tense silences. We should get everyone together, Ethan suggested. Lay everything out and see what happens. I hesitated, the thought of another confrontation filling me with dread. But Gregory's words echoed in my mind, urging me to face the truth. Okay, I agreed. But we need to be prepared for whatever comes out. The following weekend, we gathered the Calloway family at Ethan's parents' house. The air was thick with unspoken tension, everyone on edge as we settled into the living room. Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve unwavering. We need to talk about what's been happening. About the money and whatever else is going on. Margaret's eyes narrowed, her defenses rising. I told you, I don't know anything about this. Vanessa, seated beside her, looked equally defiant. And I already said I didn't do it. Ethan's frustration boiled over, his voice rising. Then why all the secrecy? Why can't we just be honest with each other? The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on us all. It was Robert who finally broke the silence, his voice steady but grave. There are things that have been kept from you, Ethan. Things that we thought were best left in the past. Ethan turned to him, confusion and hurt in his eyes. What are you talking about, Dad? Robert exchanged a glance with Margaret, a silent conversation passing between them. Your mother and I have been dealing with some financial issues. We didn't want to burden you with it. Margaret's expression softened, a rare vulnerability showing through. We thought we could handle it ourselves, but things got out of hand. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her bravado crumbling. I tried to help, but it just made things worse. The revelation hung in the air, a tangled web of deceit and good intentions gone awry. Ethan's shoulders slumped, the weight of it all crashing down on him. Why didn't you tell me? We could have worked through this together. Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her voice barely a whisper. We didn't want to worry you. You have your own life, your own future to think about. Ethan looked at me, searching for support, and I nodded, my heart aching for him. We're in this together, I said softly. We'll figure it out. As the family began to talk, the tension slowly eased, replaced by a tentative hope. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time, it felt like we were moving in the right direction. And as we left the Calloway house that evening, I realized that justice wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about understanding, about finding a way to heal the wounds that had been hidden for too long. And with that understanding came a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to build a future free from the shadows of the past. The Calloway family meeting had left me emotionally drained, and as Ethan and I drove home, a heavy silence settled between us. The revelations about the financial troubles were just the tip of the iceberg, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on us both. It was as if we were standing on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white with tension. I can't believe they kept this from me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. All these years, and I never knew. I reached over, placing a comforting hand on his arm. They thought they were protecting you, I offered, though the words felt hollow even to my ears. He shook his head, frustration etched into every line of his face. But at what cost? We're supposed to be a family, Harper. Families don't keep secrets like this. I nodded, understanding his pain all too well. The Calloways were a family bound by secrets, and now those secrets were threatening to tear them apart. But as much as I wanted to help, I felt like an outsider looking in, powerless to stop the unraveling. Back at our apartment, Ethan paced the living room, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What are we supposed to do now? He asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. Maybe we need to give them time. Let them sort through their own issues. He stopped, turning to face me, his eyes searching mine. And what about us? Where does this leave us? The question hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. I wanted to reassure him, to promise that everything would be okay, but the truth was, I didn't know. The path ahead was murky, and for the first time, I doubted whether we could find our way through it. As the days passed, the tension between us grew, a silent chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Ethan threw himself into his work, spending long hours at the office, while I buried myself in my own projects, trying to distract myself from the gnawing sense of dread. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Final warning." My heart skipped a beat, the ominous words sending a chill down my spine. I opened the email, my eyes scanning the text with growing horror. It was another anonymous message, warning me to stay out of Calloway family affairs. The words were threatening, a stark reminder of the forces at play behind the scenes. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin, the fear settling deep in my bones. When I got home, Ethan was already there, his expression weary and defeated. We need to talk, he said, his voice strained. I nodded, my heart heavy with the burden of the email. I got another message, I admitted, handing him my phone. He read the email, his face darkening with anger. This has to stop, he said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I won't let them scare you away. But what can we do?" I asked, my own frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're up against something bigger than us, Ethan." His eyes met mine, a flicker of determination breaking through the despair. "We fight back. We don't let them win." As much as I wanted to believe him, the odds felt insurmountable. The Calloway family was a fortress, and we were outsiders trying to break through the walls. But Ethan's resolve was infectious, and despite my doubts, I found myself nodding in agreement. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We'll do this together." The days that followed were a blur of strategy and planning, as we worked to uncover the truth and bring the family's secrets to light. But the threats continued, a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. And then, just when it seemed like we were making progress, the final blow came. A letter arrived at our apartment, unsigned but unmistakable in its intent. It was a demand for silence, a threat to expose my own family's vulnerabilities if we didn't back off. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the realization hitting me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about the Calloways anymore. It was about my family too. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward seemed more perilous than ever. As I stood there, the letter clutched in my trembling hands, I knew we were at a crossroads. The fight for justice had become personal, and the lines between right and wrong were blurring. But even in the face of uncertainty, one thing was clear. We couldn't back down now. Not when so much was at stake. The tension was palpable as Ethan and I arrived at the Calloway residence for what we hoped would be the final confrontation. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your skin prickle and your heart race. We had called this meeting, determined to finally bring everything into the open and lay the family's secrets bare. As we entered the living room, Vanessa was already there, her expression a mask of defiance. Margaret sat beside her, her posture rigid, while Robert stood by the window, his gaze distant and contemplative. The room felt like a powder keg, and we were the match ready to ignite it. Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve evident in the set of his shoulders. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We're here because we need to address the issues that have been tearing this family apart." Margaret's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding her features. "And what issues would those be, Ethan?" Ethan exchanged a glance with me, and I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "The financial troubles, the secrets, the threats," he said, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." Vanessa scoffed, her bravado barely concealing her anxiety. "I've already told you I had nothing to do with the money. And yet, here we are," Ethan replied, his gaze unwavering. "If it wasn't you, then who? And why all the secrecy?" Robert cleared his throat, drawing our attention. "There's more to this than you realize, Ethan. We've been trying to protect you, but perhaps it's time you knew the truth." The room went silent, the weight of his words pressing down on us all. Ethan's brow furrowed, confusion and determination warring within him. "What truth?" Margaret shifted, her facade cracking ever so slightly. "We've been dealing with some legal issues," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things that could affect the entire family." Vanessa's eyes widened, genuine surprise flashing across her face. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Margaret hesitated, her gaze flicking to Robert for support. "It's complicated, but we've been under investigation for some financial discrepancies at the bank. We didn't want to drag you into it." Ethan's jaw tightened, the betrayal cutting deep. "And you thought keeping us in the dark was the solution?" Margaret's expression softened, regret mingling with her resolve. "We thought we could handle it. But things spiraled out of control." The revelation hit like a punch to the gut, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. The siphoned funds, the threats, they were all part of a larger scheme, one that had ensnared the entire family. But before we could fully process the implications, Vanessa spoke up, her voice shaking. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about any of this." Ethan turned to her, his anger tempered by a flicker of empathy. "Then why the secrecy? Why didn't you come to me?" Vanessa's bravado crumbled, vulnerability shining through. "I was scared, okay? I didn't want to lose you, Ethan. You're the only one who's ever really understood me." The admission hung in the air, a fragile truth that shifted the dynamics in the room. Ethan's expression softened, the anger giving way to understanding. "We're family, Vanessa. We should have faced this together." As the tension slowly eased, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The confrontation had brought long-buried secrets to light, and with them, the possibility of healing. But just as it seemed like we were reaching a resolution, Robert spoke again, his voice grave. "There's one more thing you should know. The investigation isn't just about the bank. It involves some questionable dealings that could impact your future, Ethan." Ethan's eyes widened, the implications crashing down on him. "What do you mean?" Robert sighed, the weight of his words heavy with regret. "There are business associates who might try to use this against you, to leverage your position. It's why we've been so cautious." The revelation was a final twist, a reminder that the fight wasn't over yet. But as I looked around the room, at the family finally united in purpose, I knew we would face it together. In that moment, I realized that justice wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about truth, about bringing light to the shadows and finding a way forward. And as Ethan and I left the Calloway house, hand in hand, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next together. The weeks following our confrontation with the Calloway family were a whirlwind of change and reflection. The truth had been laid bare, and with it came the slow, tentative process of healing. Ethan and I found solace in each other, our bond strengthened by the trials we had faced together. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan and I sat on the porch of our apartment, sipping coffee and watching the leaves dance in the wind. The air was filled with a sense of renewal, a reminder that even after the harshest storms, life continues to grow. Ethan turned to me, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I've been thinking a lot about what's next for us," he said, his voice steady and hopeful. I nodded, feeling the warmth of his words seep into my bones. "Me too. It feels like we've come through the worst of it." He reached for my hand, his touch a comforting anchor. "I know things have been tough, but I'm grateful we faced it together. I don't know what I'd do without you, Harper." I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling with emotion. "We're stronger because of it. And I think your family is too." The Calloways had begun to mend their fractured relationships, slowly but surely. Vanessa had taken responsibility for her actions, acknowledging the damage her insecurities had caused. She was working to rebuild trust with Ethan, her sincerity a welcome change from the manipulative facade she once wore. Margaret, too, had softened, her protective instincts tempered by a newfound understanding. She had reached out to me, her apology heartfelt and genuine. It was a small step, but one that hinted at the possibility of reconciliation. As we sat in comfortable silence, the doorbell rang, breaking the tranquility of the morning. I rose to answer it, surprised to find a courier holding a small package addressed to me. Curious, I opened it to find a letter from Margaret, her handwriting neat and precise. Inside was a note, simple yet profound. "Harper, I owe you an apology, not just for the past few months, but for the way I've treated you since you entered our lives. I see now that my fears of losing Ethan blinded me to the wonderful person you are. Thank you for standing by him, and for helping us see the truth. With gratitude, Margaret." The words were a balm to old wounds, a gesture of peace that I hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. I felt a sense of closure, a weight lifting from my shoulders as I shared the letter with Ethan. He read it, his eyes shining with emotion. "I knew she'd come around eventually," he said, his voice filled with pride and relief. We spent the rest of the day reflecting on our journey, the challenges we'd faced, and the growth that had come from them. The themes of justice and protection had woven through our lives, guiding us to a place of understanding and acceptance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan turned to me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Do you ever wonder what's next for us?" I smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. "I think whatever it is, we'll face it together. And that's enough for me." His eyes met mine, a promise of the future we would build, free from the shadows of the past. "Together," he echoed, his voice a soft vow. And as we sat there, hand in hand, I realized that the journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new revelations, and perhaps even new secrets to uncover. But whatever lay ahead, I knew we were ready to face it, armed with the lessons we'd learned and the strength we'd gained. The story of the Calloways was one of redemption and forgiveness, of finding light in the darkest of places. And as we looked to the future, I knew that our story was just beginning, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family.